is locked down, facing this not only this crisis but crisis created by Indian government, Indian security forces, and we have organized this conference with the support of all parties Kashmir Parliamentary Group, led by Debbie Abrams MP, Labour Friends of Kashmir led by Andrew Gwynn MP, Conservative Friends of Kashmir led by James Daly MP, our European friends Anthea McIntyre MEP, former MEP, Friends of Kashmir in the European Parliament, Richard Corbett, former MEP from European Parliament, and Friends of Kashmir, former chairperson for the Friends of Kashmir group. Thank you very much. And I welcome all of you, especially the President of Azad Jammu and Kashmir, Sardar Masood Khan, who have always supported us and encouraged us to do the lobby on Kashmir internationally. I would like to welcome all those friends from media, Pakistani High Commissioner Mohammed Nafees Zakria Sahab, all parliamentarians from Pakistan and UK. So I will not make a speech because we will have a speech from President of Azad Jammu and Kashmir, Sardar Mohammed Masood Khan, and followed by Andrew Gwynn, our chairman for Labour Friends of Kashmir, and other parliamentarians who have to leave soon. So I will welcome to President of Azad Jammu and Kashmir, Sardar Masood Khan, sir, please.
The Honorable President of Jammu Kashmir is arriving on his seat just in a minute's time.
Can I request Andrew Gwynn to start, please, before the President comes?
Thank you, and it's my pleasure to be at this online conference. I just want to, the President's here, so maybe we should hear from the President.
राजा साहब आप किधर हैं?
ये सर
राजा साहब हाथ हिलाइए।
जी
अच्छा ठीक, तो मैं शुरू करूं?
जी बिस्मिल्लाह करें।
Good afternoon, everybody. It is evening here in Pakistan. It's a pleasure to talk to everybody, and I hope everybody is safe and healthy in these unusual circumstances. I can't address everybody because I don't know who is sitting and who has yet to join, but my greetings to everybody, and it is a pleasure to see you in such a large number. Good afternoon, everybody. It is evening here in Pakistan. It's a pleasure to talk to everybody, and I hope everybody is safe and healthy in these unusual circumstances. Self-determination movement. I can't address everybody because I don't know who is sitting and who has yet to join. But my greetings to everybody, and it is a pleasure to see you in such a large number. Good afternoon, everybody. It is evening here in Pakistan. It's a pleasure to talk to everybody, and I hope everybody is safe and healthy. Profound empathy for the people of the United Kingdom, because you've been through hell because of COVID-19. And I feel your pain, as a matter of fact, because we are going through the same trauma here in Pakistan and Azad Kashmir. And I was looking at the numbers, and you have already crossed the number of 39,000, with 39,000 fatalities and some 278,000 confirmed cases. So my sympathies and condolences for all the families who have suffered. And the entire nation has suffered. And I was addressing a webinar, and I think that this is a very challenging time for the United Kingdom. First time you're passing such a big, passing through such a big catastrophe after the Second World War. So I also want to convey my sympathies to the members of the diaspora community who have also suffered equally. I say so because most of them hail from Azad Kashmir, and some of them are from the Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir. In Azad Kashmir, we have been relatively fortunate because the number of fatalities has been low, but the infections are increasing because of eased lockdown, and that is a challenge. We are fighting on two fronts to fight and beat back this deadly virus, and at the same time to keep our economy afloat. So these are very difficult choices that we are making, but I think that so far the Azad Kashmir territory has been very lucky. The Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir has suffered from COVID-19, of course, under very difficult circumstances, under very unusual circumstances, because they were already under a lockdown, and it would be euphemistic to call that a lockdown. It was not a lockdown. If it is properly characterized, it was a siege, which started on August the 5th last year, and it was the most punitive siege one has ever seen in recent times. So there was a lockdown upon a lockdown, and during these twin lockdowns, the Kashmiris have not been given the kind of treatment and care that they expected or deserved. They were discriminated against because India perceives them, the occupation forces there perceive them to be enemies. And there, of course, the fatalities are rising and infections are also increasing. And the Kashmiris there fear that that their territory might become a hotspot for the pandemic. Another thing that I want to highlight is that India is using this pandemic as a cover to brutalize the people of Jammu and Kashmir. We thought that India's attitude towards these captive Kashmiris would be humane during this pandemic, but they became even more ferocious and brutal during these times. A fresh spate of killings has started in Kashmir. Usually they target young men and they go after them, they gun them down, they blast houses, there's collateral damage, they destroy critical infrastructure, and they do not hand over the dead bodies of these boys to their families. So there's an angry reaction, and people offer prayers in absentia, and also there are demonstrations over these killings. And when there are demonstrations, the Indian occupation forces use pellet firing shotguns, automatic weapons. There's many other ways of terrorizing people. Now, the number of these killings is increasing. Last month in May, 33 young men were killed. And let me show you that they are not terrorists. They call them militants. I mean, these Indian occupation forces and the police forces call them militants, but they say that the total number of these militants is 230 to 240. And they are pitted against 900,000 Indian occupation forces armed to the teeth. Now, one thing that I want to highlight, and it is not on the radar screen of the international community or the world parliaments, is the introduction of the new domicile rules in the occupied territory. Now, what are these new domicile rules? And they were also introduced in the dead of night, stealthily, taking the cover of the pandemic. So because the Indian occupiers knew that the world's attention was diverted towards COVID-19, so they used this window, this opportunity to introduce these rules. Now, these rules are designed to change the demography of the region for all times to come. These will have a permanent effect. What they're doing is that they would be importing Hindus from all over India and settle them in the Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir. And these people who would be brought over, they include civil servants, army officers, or civil servants who served in statutory bodies, or they have taught in educational institutions. They and their families would be settled in the occupied territory. This is in violation of a law that was there, which dates back to 1927, which recognized 4 basic rights, 4 fundamental rights of the Kashmiris. And these rights were: 1, permanent residence; 2nd, acquisition of property; 3rd, education; 4th, employment. All these rights have been taken away. And instead, these new people would be settled there, and most of them would be Hindus. There's a formula that whoever has served in India for 15 years or has appeared in the 10th and 12th class examinations or studied there for 7 years, they would qualify. They would qualify not only for settlement, but also for jobs. Also, migrants from all over India, migrant workers from all over India, from Rajasthan and from Maharashtra and Bihar and Bengal and Punjab and Delhi, they would be settled in Kashmir. And their numbers, more than 400,000. You have others too. For instance, I can tell you that there are refugees, Hindu refugees. They would give them this permanent resident status. Now, what they're doing is that they're fast-tracking this settlement. I mean, to acquire these domicile certificates. Once an applicant has submitted his or her application, the officials, concerned officials, are required to process them in 15 days. And if a civil servant doesn't do that, he would be fined 50,000 Indian rupees. These are like Nuremberg laws, which were introduced by Hitler in 1935, last century. And their purpose was to take away German nationality and identity of the Jews. They were made second-rate citizens. Then they were deprived of their businesses. And they were asked not to do, for instance, medical practice. They were excluded from jobs. It's exactly what we see happening in the Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir. So what we see there is basically systematic disenfranchisement, dispossession, and displacement of Kashmiris. Now, there's another irony, I'll tell you, that these outsiders would be able to settle in the territory of Jammu and Kashmir. But if you belong to diaspora community, your child or even you yourself cannot go back to Kashmir and settle there, according to these laws that have been introduced. Second, the Kashmiris themselves in their own homeland will have to prove that they are domiciles of that territory. If they do not have a domicile certificate, they would not qualify for about 480,000 jobs. So what is happening, because they would have domicile certificates, others would come and grab those jobs. So what we see there is land grab and Kashmiris being deprived of their jobs and their businesses. And this would create stress, and these Kashmiris would be forced to migrate or probably forced to start armed resistance against these outrages. Now, what else is happening? I just want to highlight. One is that in order to divert attention from what India is doing in the Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir, the crimes against humanity that it is committing, and genocide and war crimes and ethnic cleansing, in order to divert attention from these crimes, it has escalated the situation along the line of control, the ceasefire line between the two Kashmirs, between Pakistan and India. And in the recent past, they've already violated the line of control for 1,100 times or more than that. And that has resulted in casualties in Azad Kashmir. And they have destroyed the critical infrastructure of the households and neighborhoods along the line of control. There are some 80,000 households which are affected by Indian fire. India has been also threatening Pakistan with a war. They have openly threatened their cabinet ministers, their army commanders. They've said that they would attack Azad Kashmir, that they would attack Gilgit-Baltistan, they would take back these areas militarily. They have also said that they would disintegrate Pakistan. And I'm not just cooking up these things. You can go to the social media portals, or also to the newspapers, and it is their defense minister or their prime minister making such statements. We are apprehensive that India is also preparing for a false flag operation. An operation would not be real, but it would create a situation, and then they would find a justification for attacking Pakistan, Azad Kashmir, or Gilgit-Baltistan. And another complication which has emerged in the recent past is the India-China standoff in Ladakh. And, you know, Ladakh is contiguous. This territory is contiguous to the Jammu and Kashmir territory in Gilgit-Baltistan. This also stokes the flames of war, and it heightens tensions in the region. You all know about the discrimination, systematic discrimination against Indian Muslims, and therefore the war in Kashmir, or the struggle for freedom or self-determination in Kashmir, is fast turning into a civilizational war. In short, the situation is very incendiary, and the human rights violations right now in the Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir are horrendous, unacceptable, unconscionable. Now, let me come to the operative part. I first want to thank British parliamentarians for their constant engagement. And I hope Debbie Abrams is there. She was in Azad Kashmir. Ms. Abrams, are you there? Can you raise your hand?
She's there.
Oh, hello. So it was so good to have you in Muzaffarabad, and your tour was very productive. So, and let me pay tribute to you for your leadership and your very effective stewardship on the issue of Jammu and Kashmir, because you head and lead this cross-party caucus within the British Parliament. And we are grateful for the efforts that you have made and the doors that you have opened within the House of Commons and the House of Lords, and within the diaspora community, I would say. So thank you so much for the endeavors that you have made for the realization of the right to self-determination of the people of Jammu and Kashmir. So my thanks to the British Parliament for constant engagement on the Jammu and Kashmir issue on cross-party basis. It is not a partisan issue. It is not an issue which is pursued by the Labour Party or the Conservative Party or SNP or Lib Dems, it is a British issue pursued by British parliamentarians. Now, the international response to the illegal steps that India took last year was very encouraging, whether it was the world parliaments or the media, the international media or human rights organizations. But you know, this groundswell of support for the Kashmiris, this tapered off because of a number of other developments. One was, of course, Brexit itself, elections in the United Kingdom, also COVID-19 now. There were developments in North America, particularly in the United States. So because of that, there's been diversion of attention. But still, I'm grateful to the British parliamentarians who have been focusing on this issue. Let me tell you that these issues that I have enumerating, recent killings or the introduction of the discriminatory colonial domicile rules, on these there has been scant or inadequate response from the international community. Now, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation has condemned these measures. The Human Rights Commission has castigated India for what it has done. And the European Parliament has been active before COVID-19 and after. You would recall that in March this year, some 650 MAPs had tabled more than 6 resolutions calling out India for creating a crisis of statelessness in India itself, and appeal to India to implement the UN Security Council resolutions on Jammu and Kashmir. This was very encouraging. Those resolutions were not passed at the request of India because Narendra Modi was about to visit Brussels and they rescheduled them, but that they could not be scheduled again because of COVID-19. So I think day before yesterday, 15 MAPs have written a letter protesting against the atrocities in the Jammu and Kashmir territory. They have addressed this letter to the president of the European Commission and also to the High Representative. This is very encouraging and reassuring. The road ahead. You know, I recall that before the COVID-19 lockdown, the British Parliament had scheduled a debate. And I would request you, if you have not already renewed your request for that debate, I would request you to have that debate as early as possible, because Kashmir is literally burning right now and young men are losing their lives, and these domicile rules would change the very nature and composition of what we call the Jammu and Kashmir state. And it would be too late. I mean, if we take action, let's say next year or the year after, it would be too late because the imperialists, the irredentists would have annexed the territory through multiple means. Now, second is that during Prime Minister's question hour, despite all the limitations that we have during the lockdown, please raise this issue, and this would be very helpful for the Kashmiris. I would also say that it would be good for this group or this cross-party group or the All-Party Parliamentary Kashmir group to lobby with the FCO and with 10 Downing Street. I think that you can talk to or engage Dominic Raab and Prime Minister Boris Johnson. And last time when we had a webinar, Yasmin Qureshi, is she sitting here? Or has she not joined yet? But Yasmin Qureshi had made a proposal, and I'm repeating it. She said that there should be a cross-party meeting of all the political parties to build consensus on Kashmir. I mean, we have these statements, and these statements are really very encouraging and reassuring. But what if all the parties, they get together and develop consensus on their strategy on Kashmir, and they pursue it consistently, that would be very helpful. She also made another proposal that the front benchers, in fact, a caucus of front benchers from all political parties could engage Mr. Boris Johnson and Mr. Dominic Raab to brief them about the developments in the subcontinent, particularly in Jammu and Kashmir. So I leave these proposals on the table. I have also proposed repeatedly that a BDS movement should be started against India. I mean, if it could be started for Palestine, why not